Hard to imagine anybody more D.C. than our next guest, a Washington, D.C. native who went to DeMatha Catholic, American University, wrote for the Washington Post. None other than David Aldridge. How are you, D.A.? Good to see you, man. How are you?
Rich, I'm good. DeMatha Catholic High School was the big win last night over Gonzaga, one of the top teams in the country.
There you go.
I love my Stags.
I bet you do. I bet you do. Who was in the Washington Post newsroom when you first walked into it? David?
Oh man, Rich, it was great. I mean, I was 22 years old, man. So,
Right.
so you had John Feinstein covering college basketball.
Yeah.
He had literally just written the Season on the Brink book about Bobby Knight. So he was college basketball guy. You had Christine Brennan covering the football team. You had Tom Boswell writing about baseball. You had Wilbon and Kornheiser as columnists. You know, like it was ridiculous. Sally Jenkins was writing about college football when I was there. She was a college football writer. And so I just can't tell you how incredible it was. And I know everybody talks about the LA Times staffs, Jim Murray and all those guys, and,
Right.
and the Globe staff with Montville and Gammons and all those guys. They were great. They were great. But I'll put the Post staff of the late '80s up against anybody.
So you saw PTI being piloted, right? In person.
I was literally
right?
10 feet from PTI for 10 years. They would be in my desk was right next to where their offices were. And so Kornheiser would come out and go, "What's the capital of Belgium? Anybody know?"
And you being 22 years old, you
"Shut
don't.
up, I'm talking to Pete Rozelle. Shut up."
I bet you were diving in to try and help out. It kind of reminds me in a way of, I was 26 walking into the ESPN newsroom for the first time, right? And, and that's kind of the way I wanted to start our conversation. David Aldridge back here on the Rich Eisen Show radio network. I'm sitting at the Rich Eisen Show desk furnished by Grainger with supplies and solutions for every industry. Grainger has the right product for you. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by. And we were just strolling down memory lane of when you first showed up at the Washington Post at age 22. Were you covering Georgetown right from jump when you got there?
It was my first year. I was general assignment, which is what it is.
Right.
General, anything that comes up, you do it. Second year I did Georgetown, so I was 23 and covering John Thompson at 23. That was a fun and crazy year.
Well, who was there and what was it like with John Thompson?
The best player was probably Charles Smith. I don't know if people remember. I always say I got the oddest Georgetown year ever in that era. Like in between Ewing and Mourning and Mutombo, my center was Ben Guillory. That was my.
But did Thompson kind of teach you the ropes in a way?
Oh, John, yeah. I've said many times, I didn't cover Georgetown. I covered John Thompson. That was the assignment, was to cover John Thompson for the Washington Post. And John would, he was a force of nature, Rich. Just in so many ways, and great to cover. I mean, was willing to engage and argue and tease you and do stuff. And it was fun. It was great fun. It was great theater. And you always felt like you had in those days, other than Joe Gibbs, you were covering the best show in town. You were covering the best story in town. Like it wasn't close really. And so to be a kid covering John Thompson, who was at that time 3 years removed from his national championship, 4 years removed from the national championship. Yeah, it was something, man. It was something. It was incredible.
And you're talking old school with you, David, to start kind of get into the conversation that is surrounding the association right now as we're waiting for the second half, the de facto second half of the season to get started is, the annual hand-wringing over the All-Star weekend. And the format that we just saw on Draymond Green, crapping all over it, quite frankly, while it's being played on Turner. And just, I'll give you the floor here on whether you think this matters or it is sort of an indication of a league where stars don't play every night, where we're load managing just for a 2.5 month tournament, David?
It matters, Rich. I mean, you can't say it doesn't matter. You're showcasing the absolute best players you have in your league. Whether it's baseball or basketball or football or the NHL. The idea of an all-star game is these are the best players we have at this current time. We'd like you to watch them and see how great they are. So yeah, it matters. Of course, it matters. And so the amount of effort, right, is part of how that is viewed and how that is reflected. So I thought they did marginally better this year than they did last year. I mean, the game in Indianapolis was a monstrosity and embarrassment to the league. And correctly, they realized that they can't do that again. So they tried something different. I'm not going to say it was a resounding success and they should do this every year, but it was the fact that you had Wemby and Stephon Castle and some young guys with a little energy in it, and the old guys saying, we're not going to let these young guys punk us on the national stage. They played a little harder. So everybody played a little harder. That's all we're asking, I think, Rich. Like nobody's expecting, full court press. I'm picking you up 94 feet. That's not going to happen, but just play a little harder, give a little more effort. And they did. So, did they fix it? No, but it was a little better than it was last year.
Well, and again, in the conversation we're having here, and I think maybe our colleagues across sports conversation may be having today, is through the prism of what the NHL just is doing.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's great.
And that there is a sense that it matters to these guys. Now, obviously, we don't want NBA players to hit one another in the same way we just saw in the Four Nations, right, between U.S. and Canada, but a competition, something competitive. Do you think we'll ever see that again, in an all-star weekend, David?
Well, look, I think U.S. versus the world is pretty much the last card they have to play, right? Like they've tried every other kind of permutation of picking the all-star teams. That seems to me to be the play. That seems to me what they were, even though we're supposed to believe that the 4 TNT people or the 3 TNT people actually pick the teams. I'm a little skeptical about that. I think it was more, let's get the old guys on one team. Let's get the international guys on one team. Let's get the young guys on one team and see what happens. And as a result, I think the competition was a little bit better, as I said. But the kind of logical way to take this out going forward is to have a U.S. versus the world kind of setup. Now, there are inherent problems with that potentially. And I think Damian Lillard pointed this out. There's way more. I know that there's a lot of international star players in the NBA. I know there are, but there's still more U.S. born players who are star level players than there are international. And so if you are basing contracts or bonuses on all-star appearances, well, you're making it a lot harder for more U.S. players to make all-star teams if you only have one team of 12 NBA players on it in a given year than for international players that just have more space. There's just fewer of them than there are U.S.-born players. So that's something you got to kind of work out and work through.
So expand the rosters, David, right? I mean,
Well, that's what I've only been saying for the last 30 years.
I mean, seriously, like
an easy fix.
Off of whose nose does this skin come? You know what I mean? Like it's what are we, certainly since listen, man, the last thing I want to be sitting here in this chair is talking about LeBron deciding too late and cost someone else a spot that he needs to stay healthy for the second half of the season, which we all knew, he needs to do and can understand that that's what he wants to do. And I don't want to be talking about, Wemby and Chris Paul getting disqualified in a silly competition, right? Or the fact that, a G leaguer is the only guy who's willing to stand up and show everybody that he can defy gravity. You know what I mean? Like this is not the conversation we should be having off of this.
No, and I was glad to see John Morant say maybe I'll dunk next year.
That's great.
I think the league needs this. They need somebody to do it. Like LeBron's not going to do it. We understand that time has passed, but some of these young guys have to step up and say, "I'll do it. I'll try it. What the hell? I've got nothing to lose." I mean, what does Anthony Edwards have to lose? Like, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, what does he have to lose? Like, he's a great player. He's going to get a max. He's already on a rookie extension. Like, he's one of the best players in the league. Like, nobody's going to think less of him if he finishes second in a dunk contest. You know what I mean?
No.
So you like to think that Ja and Ant and some of the young guys that are coming up, maybe SGA one year, says, I'll do it. What the hell? Let's have some fun, because it's about having some fun. And the thing that I think resonates with Mac McClung among most people, I think most right-thinking people, is the fact that he's a young guy that's willing to try some different stuff and have some fun with it, and jump over a car, like that's kind of cool. Come on, it's cool, and you'd like to see, like I remember when Gerald Green blew out the cupcake on the rim or on the backboard. That was fun. Yep. That's fun stuff. Let's get some fun back into this thing.
Yeah, and then you're going to see the player who wins the dunk contest, or at least captures the fancy in attempting to win it, play in an actual NBA game afterwards. That's helpful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's helpful. And if some of the stars are needing to protect their brand by not being in the dunk contest, all I would do is say, of all the accomplishments Michael Jordan has, you and I could fill up the rest of my show over the next hour and a half talking about him, David. But the jump man logo is of Jordan winning the dunk contest. Like, you have no idea what brand building opportunities can come up from you saying you believe you can fly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I would go here on this front.
Absolutely. I agree. And hopefully, we're seeing some momentum toward that with some, and again, I think it has to be the younger players in the league. I get that people don't necessarily want to see the old guys dunk. Although if LeBron did it, of course, it would be, the ratings would be insane, but he's not going to do it at this point. But yeah, I mean, it was great to see Castle dunking. I hope he does it again next year. He had some great dunks. Like, he was terrific. Like, he wasn't. It's not like he sucked. He was awesome. He had a couple of really good dunks, and I hope he'll play again. He'll do it again next year.
David Aldridge here, the author of the Basketball 100. He's got a copy behind his right shoulder. I have one here, right here in the studio. The story of the greatest players in NBA history. Go get it where all books are sold. So what is the story, do you think, of the now second half of the season that will begin on Wednesday night and then mostly on Thursday for the association?
I mean, to me, there's a lot of storylines. I'm kind of interested in who's the third team in the East. I think we know Cleveland and Boston are the first two, but who's the third? Is it New York? I mean, it could be. Sure, could be New York. Is it Milwaukee? Orlando's kind of fallen off a little bit, right? I thought it might be them. Indiana's had a great run. But I'm not sure. So I'm curious to see does anybody secure that third spot? Because the thing is, you want to secure the third spot so you don't have to play the top seed in the second round. That's why the third spot matters, right? Mm-hmm. So you're trying to avoid finishing fourth and having to play Boston or the Celtics, or Boston or Cleveland in the second round. So that's one thing, and out West, look, it's a sprint. It's a sprint with everybody that's out there behind OKC. And there's so many guys, so many teams. It was interesting. I don't know if interesting is the right word, but Draymond just kind of basically saying the Warriors are now going to win the NBA championship was quite the marker to put down an All-Star weekend. A team that's barely in the play-in tournament is now going to win the NBA championship, according to Draymond. So we'll see. But I am also curious about that 2-3 in the West between the Grizzlies and the Nuggets. At least right now it's the Grizzlies and the Nuggets, because I saw Denver early in the season. They looked awful, and credit to Jamal Murray for really kind of coming in and helping rescue that thing, because it was going south, and Westbrook's having a really good year too. So the West is crazy and wide open. And what happens if the Suns don't get in? What do they do? What
Right.
do they do?
And then you've got the Spurs at 12, where,
Right.
and, they go ahead and get De'Aaron Fox. We'll see how the Kings fare in that regard. You got the Warriors that you point out is at 10th. The Mavericks, I mean, what is going on in Dallas right now? I mean, the commissioner was asked about what the fans' reaction is, and he had to address, obviously a direct question. Anthony Davis, is he any sign of him coming back? Because clearly that is going to be big. The Mavericks are in Los Angeles on Tuesday night to take on the Lakers. What a fascinating development this is, David.
Yeah, it's not just AD, and it's weeks for AD. It's not days, it's weeks for AD. Wow. It's also now they got Gafford's out the rest of the regular season. Like he's out, he's done, he's gone. And Lively's out right now. So they got no center right now. They have 0 centers available to play at a very precarious time in the schedule for them. So, man, this is rough. Like you couldn't have a worse scenario for Nico Harrison and that ownership group than they're facing right now. Like if AD's playing and they're winning, and they certainly look in that first game like, okay, this could work. Like they got enough here to make this interesting. And then he goes down in the first game he's playing for the Mavericks. I mean, and now he's out for weeks. It's just, boy, they're in trouble. They're in a lot of trouble, Rich. And it's not going to get easier for them. It's going to get harder if they have to go a month without, any depth whatsoever at center. It's asking too much of the rest of the guys that they have.
Well, and since you and I haven't spoken since that trade went down, what's your sense in talking to everybody about why it happened and how it went down? David?
Well, here's a few things. One is that you can rightly castigate Nico Harrison for how the trade happened and what he got in return. I think if you're trading one of the 5 best players in the league, you can ask for anything of any team. Like you could call Oklahoma City and say, I want SGA for Luka Doncic. And they could say no, Rich. They could say, no, that's preposterous. We're not doing it. But you're not wrong for asking, right? Like you're not wrong for calling the Bucks up and saying, I want Giannis. You're not wrong, right? Because that's how good Luka Doncic is. He's on that level with those guys. So the fact that they didn't do that and really kind of cut themselves off is kind of odd. And then, okay, if you're going to make the trade with the Lakers, just because you want to make the trade with the Lakers, you got to get everything from the Lakers, right? Like you got to get both picks. You got to get at least a couple of young players along with Christie, who's played well for Dallas since he's been there. But you got to get more, right? And so those, you can take that, put it to the side. You can criticize Nico Harrison for that. But what I'm not going to do is absolve Mavs ownership of their responsibility in this, which people seem to want to just blithely ignore. General managers recommend at that level. They do not decide to trade Luka Doncic. They recommend to ownership that we trade Luka Doncic. And the owner decides if they're going to do it or not. And that's what I want to see more of in terms of how this trade is being evaluated. I want to see more people holding ownership accountable because owners decide to trade a guy like Luka Doncic, not Nico Harrison. That's an owner decision. So they have to take the responsibility for this as well and not just leave him out there to take all the, proverbial bullets on this one.
Well, it sounds like Mavericks fans are attempting to do that with signs and with language, and they're getting the gate.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of that, but I've seen mostly Nico Harrison's the dumbest man who ever lived, and that's not true. But I've seen more of that than, wait a minute, why did they okay this? Why did they say no? Why did they say we'd rather trade him than pay him $345 million? Why? I think that's a fair question to ask of the people who actually made the decision.
Well, the general sense is that they didn't want to pay him because he doesn't have the body commitment, or Michael Finley had to take a beer out of his hand, or I mean, like,
whatever the reason was, I would like to hear them articulate that reason on the record. That's I don't think that's too much to ask of the people who own the basketball team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Who actually own the team to say, okay, why did you say this was a good thing to do? And give me specifics. Don't just talk about, we're culture and things like that. No, there's a specific reason you didn't do this. And again, I've said this and I've said this for 30 years, Rich. Owners are allowed to do whatever they want. It's their team. They bought it. Okay. So the Dumonts and the Adelsons, they have every right to do whatever it is they think is best for their team. But they have to explain that to the people that are paying the ticket prices. So that everybody has information to decide whether they're going to keep paying those ticket prices.
DA, you're the man. The Basketball 100, everybody check it out. Go get the book where it is currently being sold, which is everywhere. Thanks for the time. I love it.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate it, sir.
Always enjoy it. That's David Aldridge. Check him out on The Athletic as well, at David Aldridge, D.C. Of course, the D.C. is in there because he's Mr. Washington, D.C., right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.